All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to be talking about data migrations to Shopify. Definitely want to thank everybody for joining the webinar. Special thank you, of course, to Shopify for helping us put all of this together. Today, all about data migration. So, who are you going to be talking to today? Let's talk about our hosts. So, for this webinar, we've got the typical crew as you could expect. I got Patrick by my side here. Patrick, say hello. I think you're muted, Patrick.
I was still muted. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Patrick, Director of Business Development here at Sunrise Integration. Thanks for joining.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, and my name is Dean. I'm the CTO here at Sunrise Integration. Today, we're going to be talking about data migration, so it's a little bit kind of techy. So Patrick's going to be manning the chats. So if you guys have any questions or maybe you need things kind of explained again, definitely feel free to utilize the chat. And Patrick here will be making sure that all of your questions and everything get answered. So as we mentioned, during the webinar, we really look forward to having the chats and Q&A. It's definitely all about us making sure that we're answering your questions. Along the way, we are going to be giving away some really, really cool prizes. As always, we've got the standard kind of Shopify swag and Sunrise swag. I'll take a look here. I think Patrick's going to model some of that stuff for us. We've got the infamous door hanger, right?
Door hanger light box with a pen. We've got some hats. We've got my absolute favorite, which is a Shopify level/multi-tool. And we've got notebooks, and we've got tons of these sitting around. So we're looking forward to giving some more of them out.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, so throughout the process, if you're active on chat, asking questions, we'll definitely be picking people from the chat to give away some of the prizes to. We also have our big grand prize, which is going to be the $50 Amazon gift card. And at some point during this webinar, you'll see a big flashing sign that says, now's the time to email. And so everybody on this webinar probably received an email from us with a reminder. So when the time comes, when you're alerted, just reply to that email, say, hey, I want to be entered, and we'll pick a winner from that list. So let's jump into it. Let's get started. What are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to be talking about data migrations to Shopify. So we're going to start by saying, first and foremost, why? Why do you want to migrate to Shopify? What is it that Shopify can do for you that you might not be able to do with your current platform? Then, of course, you want to prepare for the migration, right? So what are you migrating? Why are you migrating? How much information should you migrate? Preparation is an extremely important thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Patrick's going to share a little bit of stories about, previous clients and how they prepared and, what information they needed to migrate. So this is definitely an important thing. Then we're going to talk about two different ways of migrating data. The first one is kind of the more simple method, which is CSV files. Shopify does support CSV file migration, so we will walk you through that in real time, show you how to do some simple migrations using Shopify's native importing capabilities. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the advanced API migrations. This is a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more nebulous, not as easy to show, but we definitely want to talk about kind of the when and why, right? Yeah, at what point are you going to need to do some more advanced migrations, and when does it feel like you need to reach out to a development agency like Sunrise Integration to help for some more advanced features. And then we'll end up with a kind of hey, don't forget, during migrations, if you are moving from an old platform to a new Shopify platform, there's always a couple little housekeeping things you want to make sure that you do. So we'll go over that. So that's going to be our agenda for the webinar. Let's jump right into it. So we're going to start with the first thing, which is why should you even migrate your e-commerce site over to Shopify? So there's a couple problems that a lot of e-commerce companies come to us with. We are a development agency. We are a Shopify partner. And Patrick here gets tons of phone calls and tons of emails from clients saying, I've got a bunch of problems with my current e-commerce platform. I need to migrate somewhere. So there are a lot of common issues and kind of common problems that we see that tell us, hey, it's probably time to migrate. Some of the most common ones that we're seeing are things like old legacy sites, people that are on old platforms, maybe something that's been kind of custom built, which typically leads to like, hey, I'm having a problem managing and it's really difficult to manage, or I can't update products. Or things like my site's really slow. I'm having, people are complaining that it's not loading fast enough. Or they're just missing some basic features, right? A lot of modern sites these days have some really cool features, like shop pay and being able to defer payments and things like that. These are a lot of things that a lot of modern sites have. And then, of course, just the UI UX, right? Does it look good? Can you have some kind of cool themes? These are definitely a lot of issues that if you're seeing this, it's probably a good bet that you might need to be looking for a new platform. Patrick, at this point, I want to kind of turn it over to you. How does this align with what you're seeing and kind of hearing from clients who are, seeing these issues and figuring, hey, I think it's time to upgrade or update from what I've got now?
Yeah, I mean, there's rarely one reason, but I like to draw a parallel between like, buying a new car, being in the market for a new car. Maybe there's a mechanical issue going on with your car. Maybe you've invested thousands of dollars at your mechanic, yet you're still getting the check engine light coming on. Maybe the car's a little bit dated or it's got some rust on it. There's a ton of different reasons to make the switch. And I know we put together this quick hit list here, but two more reasons actually came to mind that have been popping up recently, which is point of sale, right? So I'm not saying necessarily the migration of point of sale, but folks are looking for a platform that has a more unified commerce system, right? Maybe they're using Magento and they're using, Counterpoint for their point of sale. They want to move to one system that has both of these things built in. So that has been very common. And then really cool, I think recently B2B has been a motivator to get people to move to Shopify. So maybe they had a Shopify site for their direct to consumer business and their B2B business was handled in a completely different way. Maybe it's entirely manual. It's just plugged right into their ERP or they have some other system. Making the move of that B2B business into Shopify, given all their new feature functionality there. Those are two, I would say, very common things that I've been encountering in the last year or so.
Yeah, exactly. No, those are definitely excellent points. And if you are a merchant, or if you're somebody who, if this sounds familiar, if you're looking at your current site going, man, this sounds like me, then this is definitely where we come in, and we always say, you know what, it sounds like it's time to migrate. And we highly recommend Shopify, for this type of thing. Right off the bat, Shopify, it's definitely a modern cloud solution. So that solves the issue. Oftentimes these old legacy platforms are like, one server sitting in a back room sometimes, or in a colo. Shopify's modern cloud distributed, so you're not going to have performance problems. It's going to be very reliable. It's very well known as being a very easy to use platform. So the problems with weird legacy or something that's been customized, you don't have to worry about it. Very easy UI. Very high performance, like we talked about it. Probably one of the most important things is it's such a huge leader in the industry that there's lots of third-party apps. So if you're looking for something, if you want one of these cool services, or you need some feature, like a delivery or a calendaring or something like that, chances are there's a really cool app out there because people are excited to develop for Shopify. So that's definitely a good reason to migrate over to the platform. And then, of course, for the UI and UX, right, Shopify's theme store is huge. There's lots of great options in the theme store. So it's definitely a great place to go if you're looking to kind of modernize the look and feel of your store.
Yeah, I might just chime in there, Dean.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely the pain angle of like why move off of your current solution to Shopify, but the carrot that Shopify offers is grounds in and of itself. Some of the most exciting projects that we get to work on, maybe there isn't some critical issue with the current system, but a business has reached this inflection point where they're getting a lot of attention through other sales channels. Maybe they're selling through Walmart and some of these more traditional retailers, and that's really taking off for one reason or another, and they're just excited to invest in their e-commerce business. And Shopify really just offers the best platform for high velocity growth at this point, especially for newer brands that maybe don't have all this legacy infrastructure and workflows that they need to think about. So Shopify is a great platform for folks that are just at that inflection point where they're like, let's really invest and future-proof our e-commerce too. Like, I mean, that's another way to think about this is, a move to Shopify. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but if you're looking about, the health of your business in like a 5-year time frame, it's a safe bet that Shopify is going to continue to be supported and evolve, and more apps are going to come out. It's always going to be that first platform where the latest and greatest kind of e-commerce feature functionality hits. So it's really just puts businesses in a great position to take advantage of growth, not just address the pain of their current situation, if that's the case.
Yeah, great points, Patrick. Thank you. So that addresses kind of the first point, which is, if it sounds like you have any of these problems, Shopify is definitely going to be a great solution to solve it. So that kind of explains a little bit about the why you're going to be migrating. Let's now talk a little bit about the how and what that process is going to look like. So the first thing you need to do if you're going to be migrating anything is getting organized. There's this concept known as garbage in, garbage out. It's a very well-known concept. Basically, if it's a mess going in, it's going to be a mess coming out. So you want to make sure that you're prepared to migrate your information before you do anything. So what does that mean? What does the migration mean? What do you need to be looking out for? So let's talk about this. You want to make sure that you understand a couple basic things before you embark on any kind of a migration. And the first thing is where does your data reside? It seems like an obvious thing, but we've had a lot of people come to us saying, I want to migrate my e-commerce site. And we say, great, who's hosting it? Where is it? And they say, I don't know. So first and foremost, you need to know where your data is coming from, because that's going to be very important for you to understand. How can you get the data from the existing platform where it is now? Can you even get the information from the platform? So that's one of the first things you're going to want to figure out, which is where does that data reside? The next thing you want to figure out is, once you know where the data is what are you going to migrate? It's quite possible that you may have a lot of other information or not enough information, or you've got a bunch of custom things that were created. So you're going to want to figure out what information do you need to migrate. And in a moment, we'll talk about what some of the common pieces are, but that's the first thing in organizing it. So where is my information, and what information am I looking to migrate over? And then how much of it? Oftentimes people will come to us and they've got a legacy platform and they'll say, hey, I've been on this old site for 20 years. And they'll say, should I migrate 20 years worth of data to the new platform? In other words, should I take 20 years worth of old information and put it into Shopify? And that kind of leads to the next point that we talked about, which is, that garbage in, garbage out. How relevant is the information from 20 years ago? Are these still active clients? Are they still active email addresses? Are their physical addresses still correct? So there's a little bit of a cleanup process and an understanding your data process that you're going to want to do well before you start doing any kind of migration. And that's what this first step is all about, which is, being prepared and making sure you kind of understand the what you're migrating before you even try to embark on anything. Patrick,
Yeah.
as always, I want to kind of give you a chance here to chime in on this.
I might chime in on the do we need to migrate 20 years of data? A direct answer to that is, probably not. I always, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, why, right? Why are you making the move to Shopify, or why are you considering making the move to Shopify, and kind of let that guide what kind of parameters you put around your data migration needs. I would say at the least, maybe a year's worth of data, 2 years worth of data, depending on the volume of sales and activity you've seen in those years. Probably at the most 4 or 5 years worth of data. But once we're in the kind of the enterprise space, oftentimes it does kind of breach that 10 years of data threshold. And then it comes down to how many of these customers are still active? How much of this sales data is still relevant? Do we even still carry and sell these same products? All things to consider, because as I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit, the volume of data that needs to be migrated and the complexity does have a huge impact on the overall level of effort, which impacts cost, it impacts timeline, impacts the complexity of the overall project, and you don't want to lose focus of that why. So that's definitely a call out I'd make there. The other thing I'd say, as far as these are projects where the bandwidth of an internal team can quickly be exceeded. So this is one of the most common cases where merchants reach out to agencies when they're undergoing this kind of migration process. So, it's an exercise for you yourself or for your team internally to put together a short a project brief, put together a very fairly simple, even architecture diagram of all the different components of your current system that you're using. It can help guide the conversation internally, but also when you're talking to agencies and maybe onboarding new resources, it can get them up to speed super quick and help them just be better consultants overall. So 2 little tips, just from the agency perspective, selfishly, I always love it when merchants come to us with some stuff on paper so we can get off to a quick start. Yeah, that's probably all I have to add on this.
Sure, but that's a big piece, right? And that's what this whole first slide here is about, which is being prepared, right? Making sure you know what it is that you need to migrate. If you're not sure, what are some of the common things, right? So let's take a look at that real quick. What is the most obvious information that you're going to want to migrate over on an e-commerce site? And there's really what we like to call the big 3 things, right? There's going to be your product information, there's going to be your customer information, and there's going to be your order information. Those are the most common pieces of data that need to be transferred over. Now, there's going to be some other things, of course, and we'll get to some of those when we talk about some of the more advanced, but those are the 3 most basic pieces of information. You're going to have your entire product catalog, you're going to have your history of customers, right? Those are the customers who've purchased from you, and you're going to have your orders. So if you're unsure, if you're unclear where to start, these 3 are the first 3 most obvious things that you're going to want to take a look at. Make sure you can have access to that information. And we're going to really want to start with migrating those pieces over. So when it comes to migrating, how can we migrate this information easy? So I want to start with kind of the easy way of doing things for migrating this information over to Shopify. So let's focus on those 3, the big 3, as we said, right? Products, customers, and orders. How can we easily migrate those into Shopify? So one of the easy things and first things that Shopify has is the ability to handle CSV files for importing and exporting. And this is one of those things where it may seem a little bit daunting, and if you're not savvy with Excel or like Google Sheets or handling some data, it may seem like there's a lot of information here. It's not actually too difficult, but it is probably the most basic way of being able to migrate data from one platform to another. So let's start with kind of the basic for those of you who might not be as kind of tech savvy. What actually is a CSV file, and what can you actually do with it? So what is a CSV file? CSV stands for comma separated values, and it's basically a text file. And so it really has some information, a comma, and then another piece of information, and then another row. So think of it like a database. It's really taking the information, putting it into a simple file. All of the data that you would need goes into this file, and then that's kind of a common format that can be sent between different platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're kind of savvy with Excel or Google Sheets, you can import these CSV files into Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, and then you can start kind of manipulating the data. So for example, if you wanted to import some products or something like that, you could put the products into the CSV file, manipulate the data that's in the file, and then import that into Shopify. So CSV files are the most basic way of handling imports and exports out of Shopify. So let's pop into Shopify. Here's where we're going to get a little bit technical, right? We're going to be showing you how to put some files inside and outside of Shopify. But let's pop over to Shopify now and just show you how to do some really, really basic importing and exporting of data using some CSV files. Before I go any further here, I just want to kind of double check with you, Patrick. Is there any questions or anything that's kind of popped up about anything that we've said so far?
Yeah, I guess there's one kind of general question. I think it's worth mentioning it here just to make sure we talk to it specifically. But Felix asks, what are the common pitfalls that lead to inaccurate data migration, and how can they be avoided?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything you want to comment on there, or is that more something that we'll get to throughout the course of the webinar today?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a really great point to talk about that since we're about to kind of tackle importing data. So if you recall a few seconds ago, I talked about kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? So ensuring that you've got good quality data coming in is going to be important, because if you're importing old files or old emails that aren't accurate, or old addresses that are, again, aren't accurate, when you go over to your new site, the idea is it's kind of like moving into a new house, right? It should be brand new and it has that new house smell or new car smell, right? But if you're plaguing it with information that isn't very good, now your accuracy isn't going to be very good on the site. So the quality of the information that's in there isn't going to be any better than what you had before. And you should be excited to be able to start new. So during the migration process, you'll want to be able to take a look and say, hey, can I check to see if these customers still exist? Can I check to see if it's an accurate address? Not only that, but are there any errors? It's quite common for us to see misspellings, right? Maybe somebody forgot to put .com on an email address. So why would you import something like that, right? That data isn't very good. So I would say importing bad data or inaccurate data is directly going to affect how well your new site can operate. So you should really want to try to focus on doing any kind of sanitization. We'll get to this in a little bit later, but talking about AI enrichment, maybe you can use AI to fix addresses or clean up addresses. You really want to get the best quality data going into the new site, so you can start fresh and start good on the new site.
Yeah, I guess Collins looks like he had a good follow-up on that. I think you touched on that with like the AI enrichment and checking for misspellings and those types of things. But he asked specifically, how do you recommend validating data integrity before starting the migration process? So what steps might folks be able to take to make sure that they do have good data, to migrate in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's probably going to be something that's a little bit more advanced, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the advanced migrations. But there are some basic things that you can do. AI is something that we like to use a lot. Again, checking addresses, right? You can do what's called an AVS, right, an address validation check to see, is this an accurate address? Does it have any errors in it? Misspellings, those are easy. Something like a misspelling, those are things that are actually easier to handle. So using AI for that. One cool thing about Shopify is when you're doing migrations with the API through the platform, it will check basic things. So for example, for an email address, is the domain still active, right? Is it still an accurate domain? Shopify's platform will check that. So if you try to put in an email that's not accurate, it will say, hey, we don't recognize this domain. This doesn't seem, the top level domain doesn't seem accurate. So Shopify does try to put some cool stuff like that in there for you during the import process. But anything you can do ahead of time is going to be definitely very useful.
Yeah. And then I guess just to mention it, Ambrose is asking, is there a way to automate the migration process? Not in its entirety, right? There's certainly ways to streamline the migration process by being more selective in what data that you're migrating. If it's a relatively simple data migration, we'll get to this in a bit, but there's an app called Matrixify that can help with this CSV export-import process. But as far as like fully automating the process, not so much. I don't anything to add on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it might be a little bit tricky to automate depending on what you mean by automation. Typically a migration should really be happen once, right? You're really migrating from one platform to the other. It's not necessarily something that's ongoing. If it's something where you need, a synchronization, that's something that's subtly different. But hopefully with a migration, what you're doing is you're taking the data, you're cleaning it, you're sanitizing it, you're moving it over to the new platform, and then you don't need to do it again. So from that aspect, there isn't necessarily a need from an automation in terms of like doing multiple passes, but there are other things, again, that as we touched on, like, with AI, could you take the data, run it through some kind of a script or a tool to clean up, a certain field that has like, product descriptions or something like that. Those are definitely more advanced capabilities that you could certainly do to clean up some of the data. This isn't something that Shopify is going to do out of the box natively, but you would definitely look at a more advanced capability to write scripts or use some kind of APIs, and we'll talk about that when we get to the API section. But yes, not something that's going to be kind of native through any of the like CSV imports, for example, like we're going to talk about. That's not really something that comes out of the box with that. Patrick, I feel like
That's a
one of
pretty
those
good spot
guys.
to
I feel
move.
like one of those guys should get a prize, right? Those are some great questions.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, keep an eye out, folks. I believe we've got contact information for you. We'll be reaching out. If you're comfortable letting us know where we can send some prizes, we'd love to get you a hat, some swag, some Shopify stuff. But yeah, Ambrose, Collins, Felix, thank you all for your questions. Please keep them coming.
Yeah, those are definitely great questions. All right, I want to move on and talk about CSVs. We only have an hour on this one, so I want to make sure we have an opportunity to kind of talk about everything. So right now you're looking at the Shopify administration section. So for those of you who use Shopify, you're probably used to seeing this. This is the main admin area. If you're new to Shopify, you're going to end. This is the first thing you're going to see when you log into your Shopify site. So I want to go over CSV imports and show you how you can do some very basic imports of like products and customers using the Shopify platform. So Shopify does this great thing where it's actually going to help you out and give you some sample files that you can use to test things out. So for example, let's start with products. This products is probably one of the most common things that people want to do. So if I click into the products area of my Shopify site, I have some existing products already because this is an existing site that I have. So if this is a brand new site, you might not have any products. But the first thing you'll see here up on the top is this import button that's here at the top. When you click on that, it's going to prompt you and say, import your CSV file. So like we talked about a moment ago, if you have an existing CSV file with some data or some information in it, you can upload it here. If you don't have a CSV file, Shopify has this great thing here, which it says download a sample CSV file. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a sample file that basically shows you what are the columns, what is the information that Shopify wants, so you can put it into this file, so you can import it into Shopify. So if this is a blank store, if you have nothing in your store, this is going to be the first thing you're going to want to do. You're going to want to click on that import button. You're going to want to go here. You're going to click on this thing where it says download a sample CSV file, and then take that file and open it up in either Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to jump over to Excel to show you what that looks like. So this is that file that we just downloaded from Shopify. And you see here that they put some kind of example information here just to give you an idea of what to do. But basically the way Shopify handles this is you're going to have a series of columns, as you can see here, and each column has a label. So this is the handle, which is another way of saying the URL for the particular product. This is the title of the product. This is the body, the HTML, the description, the vendor information. So really it's, it may seem daunting at first, like I mentioned, but if you think of it this way, this column is all vendor information. This column is all the description information. So if you think about it that way, it's really kind of a lot of repeated information. So maybe it's not as complicated as it may seem. And then each row is basically a different product. Variants could take up multiple rows, but for now I'm just going to stick to kind of the one row paradigm for the moment. So if we look at one row and I kind of highlight this row, you can see that this would be a t-shirt. The title for that t-shirt would go here, and then each of these corresponding columns would be information that would be imported into Shopify that you can manipulate from within this file. So if I start scrolling over to the right, you can see all the different pieces of information that are available on this particular CSV file. So all you would have to do is take your data and copy and paste it, or maybe have someone on your team create a CSV file for you. But if you put it in this format with all of these different columns, Shopify will understand each of these columns, all of the information, and you can import this right into Shopify right away. So this is a really basic thing that you can do. And you can see here from the different columns, you can put in all the different product options. So if you have variants, so for example, the small and medium version, this is where I mentioned, sometimes multiple rows make up one product. So these are the different option values, the small version of this t-shirt, the medium version of this t-shirt. You can put that information in here. The SKUs, if you have SKUs, inventory information for that particular product. So you can see the CSV file is really comprehensive. And it allows you to put in all the information that you want. You fill this out. And again, if you want to change anything, you literally just go in here and say, okay, I want to change the title of this, right? Maybe this is my cool shirt or something like that. So the CSV file lets you manipulate all the information, change anything that you want, and you have the file ready to go. And once you've made the changes and everything that you want, you would save this file and then import it into Shopify. So if I go back now to the Shopify screen, Patrick, any questions?
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, since we're in this screen here, we had a couple of really relevant questions I think come
Sure.
through, so that spreadsheet you might be helpful.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So Felix asks, are there specific data fields in Shopify that are often overlooked during migration? So, what are these data fields and what makes Shopify unique, and what do folks need to look out for when they're making the move from another platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say some of the more important fields, they're not necessarily overlooked, but sometimes you might not have the information, but there are certain fields that can do a lot inside of Shopify that you really want to take a look at. So for example, something like the tags. In older platforms or legacy platforms, a lot of times there's little bits and pieces of ancillary information that you use that are attached to products that somehow feed different things you have in your site. So for example, maybe it's like a product category, or maybe it's a type of product, or maybe it's some piece of meta information. So the tags, I would say, is definitely something important that you want to make sure that you can transfer over, because inside of Shopify, you can use these tags for a lot of important things. Creating collections, you can use them for within Shopify Flow, you can use them as properties that show on the front end of the website. So you definitely don't want to forget about the tags. That's definitely something important you want to take a look at. Another important field here is this published field. So if you have nothing in your store and it's a brand new store, importing a bunch of products maybe isn't a problem. But let's say you've got a store that's active, right? This is your live store. You'll notice here that you can put true and false. You probably don't want to put true for any new products that you're importing. And what published basically means is, hey, is this going to be a live product, right? Am I going to show this product live on the store as soon as you import it? Might be a little bit dangerous, right? So you probably want to set these as false. So I would say this field is really important. Inside of Shopify, it basically makes it so it's a draft product. So that way the product isn't shown live in real time. So I would say this is definitely an important field for you to have. If I scroll over a little bit more here on this CSV file, we're going to get to probably a very overlooked area, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's all of this SEO information. When you're importing new products, or if you're looking to make sure your site has really good SEO, you definitely don't want to forget about these fields. This is all of the SEO titles, meta descriptions for Google Shopping, Google Analytics. All of this SEO information, this is extremely important. So definitely don't forget putting this information, because if you forget to do it now, you can always go back and do it later, but it's a lot more tedious to have to go to every single product and add this information. So again, I would say don't forget the SEO. So I feel like those are probably three really important pieces of information that you're going to want to make sure is in the file.
Awesome. I think that covers that question. We had two that were kind of similar that came in from Collins and Alex. So I'll just read them back to back. How do you handle discrepancies or mismatches in data formats between different platforms in Shopify? And then I think Alex asks similarly, what if I have my own CSV file that is formatted differently? Can I import that? So
Sure.
I think it's just more about formatting the data from one platform's export to Shopify's import.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that actually leads really well. So let me jump back over to the Shopify screen. So if you remember on this screen where we were before, right, after you download the file, it's going to say, hey, let's import the file. So let me try to answer that second question by first importing the file that we just manipulated, right? So really all you have to do now is you're going to say, I'm going to add a file, and then I'm going to pick that CSV file that I just exported. Let me make sure I'm doing the products one. And then it's going to import. It's going to ask you, hey, do you want to overwrite in case there's a matching file? Do you want to publish this, live to your channels? And then you can click this upload and preview, and Shopify is going to give you a preview to make sure everything kind of looks right. So if you used the Shopify sample file, this should be pretty easy, right? Because you're using the correct file, that the data is in the correct format. So really, once you've manipulated that file, you can go through this upload process, then you're just going to hit this import button that's right here, and everything should be good to go. Now, I do want to answer the one question because I think it's a really important question. I'm going to jump back over here and say, well, what happens if you have a file, a CSV file that's not the Shopify file, right? This is easy, right? If you have the Shopify template, it should be easy. Let's say, for example, you have a file like this, right? So this is a custom file. This is a file that just says, hey, this is my information. If I export it from my existing site, I'm not going to have Shopify's template. So as you can see here, it has the information, but it's organized differently. So can Shopify handle that? How does Shopify handle that? Because it might be a little bit challenging having to try to like copy and paste and, trying to put everything here and align the columns into the Shopify's existing template. So can you utilize this file in any way? Yes, you totally can. And let's take a look at that. So if I jump back over to Shopify, if we go back over to this import step like we did from before, I'm going to click import. In this case, I'm not going to download the sample file, right? Because I'm going to have my own file. And I'm going to click add file, and I'm going to look for that custom file that we just looked at a second ago. So if I pick that custom file, you'll see this is my custom products. I'm going to click this upload and preview step. Now Shopify is going to kind of try. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to look at your files. I'm going to look at what's there. And you'll see there's some blanks already. This is Shopify trying to preview your file. It's going to say, I found some matches, but I haven't quite found anything. So what's really cool is in this little blue bar up on top here, you'll see a link that says change the order of the columns. So if you click into here, what's going to happen is Shopify is going to say, here's a bunch of fields on the right-hand side that I, Shopify, have, and I see a bunch of columns in your file. Why don't you try to manually remap those so Shopify can import your information? So for example, if I say, well, I know my file has a vendor field, I can click on the vendor field, and then Shopify is going to take all of the fields that are available in my file and show them here. Now, unfortunately, the dropdown doesn't show up in this screen share, but I can select, you can see here, I'm able to pick a field from my CSV. So if I say, hey, I know I have a product description, I can pick from the product description and align it. And then you'll see here on the right-hand side, Shopify is finding the matches for you. So that's a way that you can actually map the files. And then once you have everything ready to go, you can click the Save Column Headings button that's right there. And then Shopify is going to match those. And now you can see, hey, I'm matching the files from your CSV to Shopify's just by using this Change Columns Headings. So if you are uploading a new file, and to answer the questions that the two guys just had, if you have some discrepancies or if you're trying to match, you're really going to want to use this feature and this capability so that way you can match everything, and if you don't have the Shopify file, and you can make sure that everything works. And then when you do the import, you can be sure that it's mapped to everything that you need. Cool. Patrick,
Awesome.
Any more questions around that?
Oh man, we had a flood of them, but I think we've kind of gotten to most of them.
Okay, cool.
Well, I guess there's one question about how does Shopify handle data duplications during migration for customer and product records. Is that maybe a quick answer for us for Augustin?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer is during the import step, since we're talking about the CSV, let's talk about the CSV step here, right? If I'm going to add a file, and I'm going to use that custom file again that we had from before, you'll see that right here, there's a checkbox that basically says overwrite matching product information. So it's going to look at the title, it's going to look at that handle and everything that you have and say, if I see a match, what should I do? So if you check this selection, Shopify is going to say, oh, if I have a match, I'm going to take whatever files in your CSV and I'm going to overwrite the match that I find inside of Shopify. If you have this deselected, Shopify is going to just make a duplicate. So during the CSV process, this is going to be an important kind of checkbox here to make sure that you're not potentially putting in duplicates, or if you want to overwrite data, you handle it from within here. So that's the short answer of handling it. There's, probably what I would say is since you have the CSV file, there's a lot of great tools, on the CSV side of things where you can check for duplications and everything there. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, garbage in, garbage out. If you know you can clean up a file ahead of time, it's probably better to ensure that the data coming in has been cleaned up. And because Shopify is matching routines and its checks, it does some simple stuff, but you're going to catch a lot more if you can check the file, manipulate the file, and do everything ahead of time before you get to this step. But just in case you don't, you know you can at least use some of the checkboxes here to make sure you're not putting in duplicate information. So this is products. So I do want to talk about the CSVs and where else you can use the CSVs. So I know there's, this is a little bit technical and we are kind of short on time, so I want to make sure I can kind of hit all the different topics here. But basically what you just saw, which is take a CSV file, you manipulate the information and import it, that's going to get you a long way inside of Shopify. Because again, if we look at the products section, right, you have the ability to import products with a CSV file right from the administration section. You can also go over to the inventory section. And again, you've got the same capability here on inventory. So if you need to upload the quantity values and make sure that you've got the right inventory levels, again, same kind of concept. You can click in this import area. They provide you a sample CSV template, and you can import your quantity information. So far CSV files, great. You can go products, you can import your inventory information. If we go over to the customers section, again, same kind of concept, right? I'm going to click on import. Looks almost exactly the same. You can download a sample CSV file for your customers, and it's going to look very similar. If I pop back over to Excel and I click on it here, you can see I've got all the same fields, all the fields that a customer would need, their name, information. Oops, I'm actually on the wrong one here. There we go. That looks better. So you can see, you've got name, first name, last name, email, marketing capabilities. So this sample CSV file lets you import easily because it gives you the template.
And Nelson all send messages through the chat, so potentially there's more, but it did drop off pretty severely. Looks like we're back online.
Okay, that was a major crash of everything. I'm not sure if we've got anybody still left watching at this point in time. So let's see. All right, so unfortunately we had a kind of a little bit of a crash here that set us back a little bit here. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I'll see if I can kind of talk about some of these other topics a little bit. So kind of where we left off was talking about Shopify and orders. So if you recall, we looked at products and how products lets you do an import. We looked at customers, how customers let you do an import. And if you recall from the beginning, we talked about, well, orders is one of the big three things that you're going to want to be able to import into the new system. So if we look at the Shopify screen and the Shopify UI, you'll notice one thing here, that there is no import anywhere here, right? There's an export, but there is no import. So the CSV concept of being able to utilize the CSV to import is going to work for your products, it's going to work for your customers, but it's not going to work if you want to do orders, because orders are a little bit more tricky. So if part of your migration says, hey, I need to be able to do some kind of legacy information for my orders, you're going to want to have to do something different. And this is where we're going to want to talk about more advanced integrations. And this is where the API comes into play. So when and where is the API going to be needed, right? So if you're just doing products, if you're just doing customers, we just showed that looks like it makes perfect sense to be able to utilize the CSV imports. But if you've got anything on your list that says, well, I need to handle order history, or I need to be able to handle transactions, or things like gift cards, discount codes, B2B price lists, external APIs, if you've got these types of information, these are now things that there isn't going to be a way to utilize the CSV import to import the data. So this is where you're going to want to switch over to having to do something a little bit more advanced, utilizing Shopify and the Shopify API. And so the Shopify API is definitely much more of a technical thing, right? If you're just a casual Shopify user, and if you're already a little bit, it feels a little bit daunting to use the CSVs, the APIs might be something that's a little bit more advanced than you can handle. But there's a lot of great companies and third-party agencies, like Shopify, like us, Sunrise Integration, who can handle the integrations with the APIs. And so the APIs is basically a whole system of endpoints. This is the GraphQL API that lets you do imports, but you can get much more specific. So again, like we were talking about just a moment ago, if you have much more specific things like the history of orders, the transactions, right? Each individual transaction that goes into an order. You can't do that with the CSV, but you can do that here with the API integration. So if that list is things that you know that you need to do and you need to get that information over, you're probably going to want to look at hiring an agency or getting somebody who's a little bit more savvy to utilize the API to do a little bit more advanced integrations. If you do want to try to handle some of the CSVs on your own and you do want to try to tackle things a little bit more, Patrick did kind of mention this up front. There is a really cool app called Matrixify, and this gives you a little bit more capabilities on the CSV side of things. So if you think you want to try to handle some more imports, data imports with CSVs, I would suggest taking a look at this app in the App Store. It's been around for a long time. It's definitely one of the leaders in this space. A lot of people use it. It's definitely a great app, and it can handle a little bit more kind of advanced CSV imports. You see here things like collections and customers. So if you want to try the CSV route, this is definitely a good thing to try to tackle. If, however, you are looking to do more advanced API work and API integrations, there's a couple ways you're going to want to do it. Some of your if you're working with like a third-party agency, they may ask for you to create what's called a custom app. So inside of your settings and app channels here, you're going to see an area called Develop Apps. And from within here, you can basically create what's called a custom app that lets third parties, like a third-party agency or something that you want to do, to create a custom app so you can now access the API. So if you want to be able to make some of these API calls and import any of this information, you're going to want to be able to, you're going to need to access what are called API keys, and using this app development is a way for you to be able to create those keys, either use them yourself or provide them to a third party, and creating this API integration is going to allow them to do more sophisticated data migrations utilizing the API, either the GraphQL or the REST API, into your store. Now, I know we got interrupted and time is a little bit short here, but I do want to pause and see if there's any questions regarding either the APIs or the CSVs that we can answer. So Patrick, I'll kind of throw it back to you.
Yeah, I guess first of all, thanks everyone for sticking around. Definitely appreciate your patience. We did get a bit of a flood of questions coming here on the API side of things, so maybe we'll tackle 2 or 3 of them. So Leandro asks, do you need a developer for API work, or is it easy for a non-technical person to handle? I think we kind of touched on that, but is this something that you see folks doing without the support of a developer or a Shopify agency, Dean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? So with an API, there's a lot of things that you have to do. So one of the most obvious things is authentication, right? You have to be able to go in, authenticate the connection. Your server that you're using or your system that you're using has to have security on it. You've got to be able to make calls to the Shopify system. So if any of this code that I'm showing on the screen here, if you look at this and your eyes kind of glaze over and you're like, ooh, this is too complicated, then the short answer is that the API is probably not something that might be something that's a little bit more advanced than the CSVs. So everything you see here on the screen, this is what API communication is all about. Creating, in this case, it's the GraphQLs, right? Creating mutations, making queries, getting responses, dealing with JSON. If anything that you see on the screen here is just over your head, then I would say this is probably the first inkling that you should really hire an agency, because it's a lot more intricate than a CSV file. If you recall with the CSV files, right, the information's pretty straightforward. If we look at a CSV, you can see like, look, the person's name is John. You put John in the column, right? Very straightforward. The APIs, you can see, is way more sophisticated. So I would say if anything you're seeing here is over your head, then that's probably a good idea to hire a developer. Next question.
Let's see if there's anything here. A lot of questions going back to the CSV. files? I guess it would probably make sense to get as many of these answers as possible.
Yeah,
Are
let's do
there
it.
limits for CSV files in terms of size or record numbers or anything like that for the Shopify import?
I mean, I know we've imported files that literally have tens of thousands of rows. I'm sure at some point there's probably a limit. The way Shopify works is when it does the import process, it's going to do what's called background the process. So, for example, if you're going into the products and you do this import step here, when you add your file, if it's a small enough file, right? Let me just add the sample one that we had here. And you can see if it's a small enough file, it will do the upload kind of in real time. And this one only has like a couple fields in it. So it'll just say, hey, I'm uploading it and I'm done. Actually, this time looks like it's going to take a second. And so if it's a longer file, what's going to happen? You can see in this case, that one brown shoe, it got imported. There it is. So a small enough file happens kind of in real time. If it's a bigger file, what's going to happen is that screen's going to say, hey, check back later, we'll send you an email. And Shopify is going to take that CSV file, put it in the background, and process it behind the scenes. And you'll get an email saying, we're done, we're ready. So you don't have to kind of sit and wait. But in this case, it was just one file, so it did it, one product, so it did it very quickly.
Awesome. There's some questions here about, can you provide best practices for mapping CSV columns to Shopify? What fields are mandatory in the CSV file for data import? I will say this, just as we're running a little short on time, these questions are great, but we understand that every merchant is going to be unique and have kind of unique paradigms and things that to consider. I did drop our hello@sunriseintegration.com email into the chat. I'm also going to go ahead and place a link here to our contact us page. So if you'd like to schedule some one-on-one time with us to get into things, I know we had a little 10-minute gap there. We'd love to set up some time to chat with you one-on-one. But I guess, Dean, I don't know if there's other topics we know we wanted to get to before we wrapped up. Otherwise, we can go back to these CSV questions.
Yeah, there are probably a couple things I do want to touch that are important. And again, I apologize for the 10 minutes lost due to the technical difficulties, but I do want to mention some of these here at the end because it's definitely something you don't want to forget about, and I want to make sure I get across in terms of the migration. When you're migrating products, when you're migrating your customers, mostly on the product side of things, you're going to want to make sure that you keep your SEO intact. Right? So your old site, Google will have indexed products, it's going to index information. And when you move over to Shopify, the structure is going to be different, right? You're going to have potentially different products, new products. Maybe you didn't import everything like we talked about, right? If you're trying to clean up some information. So now you're going to want to make sure that the Shopify site has the same level of SEO that you had before, or take this opportunity to improve the SEO. So some of the things you're going to want to think about are the SEO meta fields, the meta descriptions, the meta titles. You're also going to think about things like image alt tags, right? Making sure that you have your alt tags for your images so those are complete, so all of that information gets indexed appropriately. And again, if you don't have it already, use this opportunity to add that so that way you're actually getting an improvement when you do the migrations. The next really important thing is going to be the 301 redirects. And so for those of you who don't know what a redirect is, I do want to pop over to Shopify real quick and show you, because this is probably one of the most important things when you're migrating a site, which is how do I make sure that my site, as far as Google is concerned, it can still find it because it may be a different structure. So inside of Shopify, in this online store area, there's this section called navigation. And when you click on the navigation, you're going to see up here that there's a thing that says URL redirects. So this is an extremely important area. This is where you're going to be able to create let me take myself out of the way here. You can see you've got a couple buttons on the thing here where you can create URL redirects or you can import URL redirects. And I'm going to create a new one here. And what this basically does is this lets you take something from your old site. Let's say you had a product. I'm just going to make something up. Maybe you had a product called, My Shirt, let's say, for example. And this was like one of your top selling products. But now on Shopify, it's going to have a different structure. On Shopify, it's probably going to be called products-/my shirt. So you're going to want to set up this redirect and save this redirect. So anytime somebody comes to your new Shopify site and they land or they come from Google and Google says, hey, my shirt is where I want to go, Shopify is going to redirect it appropriately to the myproducts.shopify, and then it's going to tell Google, hey, we need you to reindex, we need you to fix this, and Google's going to do its thing that it does to try to fix that. So this redirects area is an extremely important area that you definitely don't want to forget about as kind of the last steps of, for your migration to the new site. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I got this going. I know we're kind of out of time, but this is definitely one last piece. And of course, you may end up having hundreds of pages or thousands of pages, so you do have the ability to import. And again, you can download the CSV template, you can import it, and then make sure that all of your redirects and everything are available. So I know we're at the hour mark. We're a little bit out of time here. Definitely apologize for some of the problems that we had. Patrick, I know we did kind of talk to everybody up front here about having our Amazon gift card. So I definitely want to make sure that we make sure that that's there. So this is the official time. So if you're still with us and you still managed to fight through our technical difficulties, now's the time. Reply to the email with enter me. And we'll enter you, we'll pick one of the people to be our Amazon gift card winner. So thank you guys for sticking around here.
Thanks, everyone. And if you did want to schedule any more one-on-one time with us, please do go to the Contact Us link on our website. We'd love to chat with you.
Cool. So I do want to just mention a couple quick other upcoming events that we have for those of you who want to learn more about Shopify. For those of you in the Los Angeles area, coming up on Saturday, October 19th, we have a live one-on-one event in Eagle Rock, California. It's just outside of Los Angeles. We'll have a bunch of people from Sunrise, a bunch of people from Shopify at some local shops that are using Shopify and Shopify POS. There's a cool collectibles. There's a wine shop. It's a great way to interact, talk to people from Shopify, talk to actual merchants who are using Shopify, and we'll be there giving some demos. So this is definitely a great event coming up on October 19th in Eagle Rock, California. And then coming up on October 29th, Sunrise Integration and Shopify, we're going to be down in San Diego again, talking about retail, talking about Shopify POS with some cool kind of PGA golf members giving some golf lessons and some golf tips, while we talk about Shopify. Super cool event. If you want to learn more about it, definitely go to our website. There are sign-up forms there. These are in-person events, so if you're looking for something a little bit more intimate where you can actually talk to somebody and get some hands-on on Shopify devices and Shopify sites, these are definitely events for you. So with that said, definitely want to say thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, apologize for the problems that we had. Definitely looking forward to seeing everybody next time. So thanks again, and we'll see you at a future event.